Time now for some political analysis. Mark Landler is a White House correspondent at the New York Times. Susan Glasser has a new job since the last time we saw her. She now writes the column Trump's Washington for The New Yorker. Ramesh Ponnuru is a senior editor at the National Review, a columnist for Bloomberg View, and a visiting fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And Paula Reid is the CBS News correspondent who covers the Justice Department, the FBI, as well as the White House and anything else we throw at her. Paula, let's start with you on that theme. What the president calls Spygate, what we have talked about on this show so far, we have heard that there has been nothing new learned from these extraordinary briefings that happened on Capitol Hill this week with DOJ meeting with Republican and Democratic leaders to talk about what happened during the campaign and this probe. What more is there to learn? Because Congressman Meadows says they're about to present new documents.
That was news to me because no one in the Justice Department has ever mentioned the fact that there could be another meeting. But really, there's always another meeting. They've been doing this for months now, right? Devin Nunes will find something, some question about the origins of the Mueller probe. He'll make a lot of noise. And usually the Justice Department will eventually agree to some sort of meeting, discuss a document, even if they don't hand it over. It goes quiet, and then a few weeks later, the same thing. And again, this was an extraordinary set of meetings because here the president threatened to order the Justice Department to open an investigation. And in exchange, he got a meeting with his top justice officials. He got them to sit down with his allies in Congress. And also he got Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, to agree to ask the Office of Inspector General to investigate this question. So that's a pretty successful week, also messaging the Spygate, because everyone's talking about Spygate. No one's talking about why several campaign officials had suspicious contact with Russians, and at least 2 of them have pleaded guilty in the Russia probe.
Congressman Meadows, who was just with us, had at one point been drafting articles of impeachment to get rid of Rod Rosenstein, who you just talked about. Is that how Americans should understand this, that it's a political move, or is this something more? I mean, people hear Spygate and they do think there's something more to this story.
Well, 2 things. First of all, there's absolutely a desire to undermine the outcome of the Mueller probe. And one of the things that they were trying to do at one point was possibly fire the Deputy Attorney General. And that is sort of presented itself as not politically feasible. So it does appear that this most recent wave of demands for documents that they know the Justice Department would be hard-pressed to be able to disclose is sort of pretext to try to pursue this idea of impeaching Rod Rosenstein. But politically and legally, that's probably not actually realistic.
Mark Landler, I want to give you a chance to respond to the president's tweets, because they have been about your story that you co-wrote with your colleague David Sanger, where he is calling into question some of your White House sources and whether they exist.
Well, thank you, Margaret. The president tweeted yesterday that we, in essence, made up a source. And the issue at question was, would the president be ready to go to Singapore for a June 12th summit with Kim Jong-un? Last week, on the day the president pulled out, when he sent his letter to Chairman Kim, there was a background briefing held at the White House in the briefing room. A senior official briefed from the podium and was asked that question. And the answer he gave was, we have lost a lot of time. There's a lot of work to be done. June 12th is 10 minutes from now. And I wrote that this official basically was saying it was impossible to prepare properly for a meeting on June 12th. So the president, tweeted that this person doesn't exist. Well, he not only exists, he works for the president. So I think there's 2 issues. One, the obvious issue, the president either doesn't know or doesn't care what other members of his administration are saying. I do think it raises a valid question about the whole notion of background briefings. These are a very well-entrenched Washington custom where you go listen to an official and you don't quote that official by name. We've long had debates about this internally. At this meeting, as at most other background sessions, a reporter did say, can we put this on the record? The White House said no. But if you were to hold these meetings on the record or insist on that, there would be far more accountability, and you wouldn't necessarily have this kind of strange back and forth that we've had this weekend.
And it has been a strange one. Susan, the North Korea summit, you wrote the president is more of a deal breaker than a deal maker in your piece this week. Now the summit may be happening, after all.
Well, that's right, and it may well be happening. I think that's important for everybody to note, right? President Trump has signaled that he is very committed to it. Arguably, his tweet about Mark's story was actually because there is an internal division inside the president's administration. And I think one takeaway from all of this, right, is that nobody speaks for the president, and he has wanted it that way. Arguably, he has turned the United States, for the first time in any of our memory, into sort of the epicenter of global instability, because it's clear that in the end, decisions are being made by one man, and even if his top advisors say it's not really feasible to have a summit on June 12th, if he wants to have it, it may well go ahead. The broader point, however, I think really still stands, which is if you pull back 16 months into the Trump presidency, we know that it's a lot easier for President Trump to pull out of deals, to break deals, than it is to make them. Remember when he said that, maybe this whole Middle East peace thing will turn out to be a lot easier than anybody thought? Well, of course, we're still waiting for them even to put out a plan. And not to make light of it, of course it's a complicated issue. You still have the president, whether it's on issues like NAFTA or domestic policy issues like Obamacare, infrastructure, famous Infrastructure Week every week now in Washington is Infrastructure Week, struggling for very understandable reasons often to deal with entrenched politics. On the world stage, I think President Trump has shown that he is a newcomer, that he is not deeply immersed in the policy issues. And I think the drama over the summit, it's easier to talk about whether there's going to be a meeting on June 12th or not. The underlying issue of whether North Korea will give up nuclear weapons that have been at the foundation of the country's national security for 3 generations of the Kim family, it's still very hard to see that happening.
Ramesh, is there a deal to be struck on immigration?
Well, I do think that the moment that was most propitious for a deal passed us by several months ago. I think there was an opportunity to have the Democrats agree to a wall or at least some kind of border security, and the Republicans to agree to some kind of an amnesty for illegal immigrants who came here as minors. But for various reasons, that didn't happen. I think the president first encouraged the Democrats to think they didn't have to give up anything because he was saying so that he wanted a deal so badly. And then he came out with a list of demands, including cuts to legal immigration, that were just way too much for the political process to handle or for Democrats and even a lot of Republicans to accept. Time's gone short. I think it's going to be harder to get that kind of deal. I think that, once again, as Susan was saying, the deal maker has not quite come through here.
And Paula, on this issue of separating parents from their children when they cross illegally, you heard from both Senator Rubio and from Congressman Meadows that they're willing to move on this.
They are, but the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, may not be willing to move on this. Look, if you can't get a wall, Attorney General Sessions is the next best thing in terms of deterring people from coming to this country. And while his relationship with the president may not be the best, he has been trying to manifest the president's campaign promises on immigration every moment of every day. He's looking at the immigration courts. Not only is he staffing them up, he's giving judges quotas. He's moved from more of a civil proceeding to criminal prosecutions, and he has said publicly he is willing to separate families. So while other people may be, willing to move on this, I don't think he is. And I also think if this works as a deterrent, a lot of the people who are criticizing him now will likely be taking credit for that come the midterms and future elections.
And about those midterms, Ramesh, does the lack of deals hurt the president who sells himself as a deal maker for the party?
Well, look, if you look at the polling, Republicans have been doing better over the last few months. The so-called generic ballot, where people are polled on whether they want a Republican or a Democrat in Congress, that's been narrowing. It's been moving in the Republicans' favor. Even one poll had the Republicans up in it. So I think a lot of congressional Republicans are feeling better about this than they were a few months ago. The problem they have, I think, is the intensity factor. Who's going to actually be motivated enough to show up to vote? Right now, I think it's pretty clear the Democrats are more motivated, as is usually the case during midterm elections.
Well, we will see.
Opposition party, that is.
The opposition party, historically. We'll be right back. Thank you very much to all of you.